Welcome to Mastering Your Monday podcast, and this is the show that talks about boundaries, work-life balance, and living a life where you have control. This is for highly driven professionals who want to develop a more balanced professional and personal life and live out their true values. Those who are ready to grab the reins and change the status quo. The professional who's ready to have a life again and who's ready to take a stand, living in a way that you feel respected, valued, and fulfilled each and every day. We talk about topics like setting boundaries, taking risks, life management, and all the tips, techniques, and strategies to help you master your Monday, one day at a time. The holiday season is right around the corner, and with it comes tempers flaring, being pushed to your limits, being intolerant of others, being closed-minded. These are all things caused by several litigating factors. And the one we want to focus on today is being shut in and isolated. Now, if you're not aware, COVID-19 is a medical and social pandemic that began back in 2020. And here in 21, it has still not gone away. Have you noticed when you turn the TV on, we are seeing more and more intolerance with each other? And I believe part of it stems from being shut in for extended periods of time. You begin to feel like you can't put up with anybody else's nonsense or whatever the case. Hey, I love a great conversation. So pull up a chair, ringside that is, and let's talk the real deal today on episode 27, how social tolerance or intolerance plays a major part in our lives. And to make it even more exciting, I have a special guest co-host with us today, Raven Waterman, our resident therapist and leadership coach. Raven, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Michelle.
Hey.
Hello. Thank you for having me on. So I am a licensed therapist and executive leadership coach here in New York, and absolutely a friend to the show. So love being here to be a part of this conversation.
Oh, awesome. So, we've had a bit of this conversation on the sidelines because we're always chatting, that's my girl, Raven. And we were talking about the fact that when we're watching TV and all these things, how people just seem so much more intolerant of each other. And, being the therapist that she is, I had to ask the psychological part of it. Why are we acting this way? And one of the things we want to talk about today is actually overcoming low social contact interactions. Is that important? Are we talking? So let's start with this, Raven. Are we talking physical or social contact when we talk about social contact interaction? I tell you what, I'll take physical, you get social. So, and then we'll put it together. So for me, I think it's important for social contact physical contact as well as the social contact. You never realize, I remember watching TV and how at the beginning they had these, the elderly at these homes. And it was months before they got to see their grandkids or their own children. And, in a nursing home, you're not getting that social contact, that love, that touch that we normally get. And so one of the things that really, really hit me is I remember watching someone go see their mother and their grandmother, and they put up this big sheet of plastic where they could put their arms through. And just so that their parent can come on the other side. And they were able to wrap their arms around her through the plastic with COVID-19, and how just that touch meant so much to even the mental well-being, emotional well-being of that person. So I'm going to hand it over to you. What do you got to say?
Yeah, I definitely think there is a such a thing as being touch starved or being deprived of touch. So I agree with you. You know, with just having to keep social distance in general, but also people being more isolated from loved ones, where you would normally get hugs or be able to hug each other. When you do see each other, you know, people are so leery about actually even being able to have physical contact. So I think that that absolutely is one element of it. And socially, of course, is the other element of it, where, you know, people have really been limited in being able to socialize in the way that they would normally. And it's gone on for such an extended period of time. I mean, even you know, as much as we'll complain sometimes about our work environments, that is really for most people where we're getting 6 to 7 to 8 hours of social interaction a day. So for people who've been working remotely for an extended period of time, that was a big chunk of their socialization that was, you know, missing. And so I think that that definitely is an important, you know, aspect of what we're talking about.
So tell me, is it me? But did you find during this time of isolation, and we love our families dearly, you know, the kids, the husband, the mom, whoever's in your home right now. But did you feel like, man, I wish I could talk to my girlfriend, or we could go out and have, you still needed that social interaction with someone not necessarily in your immediate family, that they were great, but it's something about the variety of social interaction that we have and contact that we have too. Did you come across the same thing?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a difference in relationships and what you get out of different relationships, right? Different relationships will serve different purposes in our lives. So, and then you have some people who, you know, didn't have anybody in their home with them. And other people who maybe their home has lots of people. But if you're a parent, for example, or somebody who's in a caretaking role and you're caretaking, that's not really the same as socialization, and being able to connect with, you know, get out of the space that you're in and then socialize and connect with people in different ways is all such an important part of how we function.
It's funny how I've noticed, and I never noticed this before, but different people you have different conversations with, and you talk about different aspects of your personality shines through with different people, and you really didn't realize it. I don't think we really realized it until we were put in this situation of isolation. So I would almost say that when we're talking social contact interaction, it really involves both the physical and the social, that we really need both. And I remember talking to you about, even with young kids, and maybe you can speak better on this, but I understand that they say even a young child that's home with their mother all the time, they still need social interaction. They need to learn. That's what I thought was so cool, that as a young child, it's not innate. And so you have to learn to share and do other things with other people. And I think that's part of that intolerance. If you never learned how to share, if you've never learned how that there are other people in the world and it's not all me or mine, you know, how do you act in a situation like that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about the social learning, and, you know, as much as we will gain that from our families as we're growing up, I think as adults, the more that you're in different spaces, you're you know, you're constantly learning what are the norms, right? And I think with just this extended period of sort of isolation that's happened, I think people have kind of lost sight of what are the norms of appropriate behavior in social settings, right? And by social settings, I'm talking about even at the grocery store. At the end of the day, there's a way that you're supposed to show up and behave in these environments. And I think that we, you know, maybe as adults you had it, and now there's been this period of time where you haven't been in these different environments, and now you're showing back up and remembering what is normal appropriate behavior in these environments kind of gotten forgotten a little bit. I think you layer that with people's general anxieties around being out in public. How close is too close? Is this person vaccinated? Exactly. Is this person not? Who's wearing a mask? Who isn't? The general concern for one's physical well-being. So I think we're seeing all of that play out as people are starting to reemerge right back into these sort of social environments. And there may have to be some relearning that happens.
Well, I think it's almost like also you get so into yourself. So back to the kids. If you think about a child, like I said, it's all mine, me. The whole world revolves around this child. And so for however months, 18 months or whatever, the whole world has revolved around our family unit. And so you've gotten so used to yourself and others like you that when you're around differences and the difference of people is like your tolerance of people that are not like you, people that don't agree with you, people that don't act like you, you're more intolerant. And it's because you haven't, like you said, haven't had to deal with it. And one of my favorite commercials right now is I can't even remember. It's a candy bar. I think it's about a candy bar, but these two, they look like twins. They're sitting there, or sisters. And this guy is talking about, you know, how you answer this question is how you get this piece of chocolate. Mm-hmm. And he said, who's the tallest? And one girl grabs the chocolate. And he said, who's whatever? And they both get a piece of chocolate. And his last comment was, who likes sharing the most? And only one girl grabbed it. So that said a lot about the other one's personality, but it also said when the other one, she grabbed it, she picked it up and she shared it with the one that didn't pick up one. And so that to me was so telling about how we are in society.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw something similar. Somebody asked the question, or I guess it was like a comment, social media about, being interested to see people at a gathering and who, takes 3 pieces of pizza because they're afraid it'll run out, and who doesn't take any of the pizza for the exact same reason because they're afraid it will run out and others won't have. So yeah, I mean, there's sort of who we are innately as human beings, but again, we're always learning and adapting to whatever the situations are. And so you may have an innate way that you socialize and interact, but there's a little bit of atrophy that has happened because we haven't really had to use a lot of those skills, and they've been tested to the max at this point. So I think in some circumstances, not all, we're not seeing the best of people, but I think that eventually, and my hope is we'll start to get that back. We'll start to remember how we're supposed to interact. And listen, there's pandemic or no pandemic, sometimes, people have bad behavior sometimes, right? So I think that this can maybe exacerbate bad behavior. I don't know that it's necessarily the sole reason for it, but it's definitely, I think, contributing to it. And we're seeing, as people are kind of coming back out and having to really interact again, it's testing our skills. It's testing our ability to be social, thoughtful, empathetic people, and to not, just think about me and mine, right?
Exactly. And what makes it sad is the fact that we're dealing with, like I said, I said social, but it really is pandemic and political issues that are really pounding, our social interaction right now. And so that, I think that contributes to our intolerance of each other, the differences and the inability for each other to be accepting of the differences, being that part of it. But the other thing, so now that we've talked about it, how do we deal with we still have some of this social interaction, the lack of social interaction. So the thing is, how do we actually deal with that now? Because we are still having it, because it's coming back around and everything. And so we're still having to deal with the fact that space distance, that spatial difference, what we're dealing with, but then only being comfortable around certain people. And so then you have to make a snap judgment in your mind: who are your people and who aren't your people? Who are
Mhm.
you willing to trust and who are you not going to trust, based on just a visual or what you think about them? And a lot of times we are wrong. Just
Mhm.
because a person doesn't wear, let's say a person doesn't wear a mask, right? It doesn't mean that they're being rebellious. It could mean that they're in the understanding that I've had all my shots, so I'm safe.
Mhm.
So when we don't know all that information, we're actually making a snap judgment on what we see, and that snap judgment also affects our behavior and how we act and our intolerance towards each other. So with that, I've talked to a few people and they're also dealing with loneliness. And sometimes people say, "Well, I'm not lonely. I'm an introvert." So I want to really get into, if you have something to say on the last comment I said, if you can still remember. And I guess I'm so excited about this topic.
Mhm.
And also, I want to talk about the difference between loneliness and being an introvert, because I think sometimes people get that mixed up and they think I'm just an introvert. I don't need people around. But I think that's a lie that we allow ourselves to fall into. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll just say about the snap judgments. I mean, day, I think most of us are trying to do the best that we can, but I think what we need and seem to be lacking a lot is empathy in general, and both, first of all, checking in with yourself. What's going on for me right now in any given situation? Am I feeling uncomfortable or afraid for any particular reason? But then also trying to have some empathy for others. And I don't mean that we should excuse harmful or hurtful behavior, but sometimes understanding that, a person, we don't know what they're walking in the door with. We don't know what may be going on for them. And just trying to at least have a sort of an empathetic lens when you can. Ultimately, each person has to think about how they can best keep themselves safe, and ideally, we're also thinking about how we can keep other people safe, right? In what ways we can do that, because this is part of society, is the social piece of
Exactly.
it, right? You don't live in your own little tiny bubble, and so when you're again going into these environments, realizing that tensions will be high, people are feeling more vulnerable than they've felt before, and it may take a little bit more patience, courtesy, empathy, than you've even displayed in the past. So I know for myself, especially when I'm going into like retail environments, I never was somebody who would be rude or disrespectful to anybody who is working there, but really going out of my way to just say, have a great day. They're working. So I mean, at the end of the day, they're at work, but still to just give them back some courtesy, because
Oh, absolutely.
everybody is sort of working on a very limited fuse right now, and a little bit of kindness just can go a really, really long way. So that's what I'll say about that. And I think in terms of, yeah, an introvert versus, some, so I think a person, when I think introvert, extrovert, I think in terms of sort of your social battery. We all have different social batteries, and I think people can mistake somebody who's an introvert as somebody who doesn't enjoy socialization, and somebody who's an extrovert as somebody who just can't live without socialization or socializing. And I don't think that that's actually 100% accurate. I'm a more introverted person, and I really enjoy socializing to a point, to a degree, and then I have to sort of recharge my social battery. But I think, when we're talking about loneliness, that's something that, anybody can experience. And I think in reality, it was probably one of the more challenging aspects of this whole last 18 months or so, that that setting in of a bit of loneliness, the disconnection. That's not about volume. I think it's more about quality, right? Being able to have quality interactions, and getting to a point where it's like, oh, I'm not having interactions that really feel like connection, because you can be in a room full of people and still feel lonely.
Oh, yes.
Right. So,
Yes.
I think it's really looking at kind of first of all, taking that self-reflective approach and going, the interactions I'm having leaving me feeling lonely? Am I not having enough stimulating or genuine interactions where I feel really connected to somebody or something outside of myself? And I think that can create loneliness.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So when how do I say, I'm an introvert too. We know that's one of the things that clicked for us, is the fact that we're both introverts, and we're introverts at different levels. I do need that social interaction, and I realize that, but my battery is short.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 hours is about my limit. And I mean, I know it. That's why I can't watch a movie over 2 hours. So I know my limit of sitting still, and I know if I'm around people for a whole weekend, and it's a lot of people, how you go away to like a wedding or whatever, and you're away for a couple of days. I come back, I need the whole week to recharge. It just really drains me. But am I lonely? Yes, if I don't have that interaction. I do still need it. I need that conversation. I need to know that there are people that I can turn to and talk to and just brainstorm. I don't need to whine, but I need to just run through my thoughts with someone sometimes, or just knowing that there's someone there that cares about you is so important. And so for me, one of the things I did during this, and I've learned to do, and I'm still doing, even though we're going back into society, intolerant as ever. But even now, what I do is, for my friends who are single, because I'm married, I make an effort to reach out to them and make sure they're okay, even though they're starting to integrate back into society and everything. But we have to realize that there are some people that had no connection during this time. And it is so important to make that connection. And yes, you can be in a full room of people and feel lonely. But why? Because there's no connection, no heart connection, no emotional, no mental connection. And that's how we're created, and that's how we're made. And we need that too, not just physical. So, what are some actions, as we think about this and talk about this, what are things we can do to alleviate being lonely? How can we kick that lonely? Now, for me, like I said, even I know what it feels like to be lonely. And so for those who I feel that may even be in that situation, I reach out to them. Don't always think that you have to wait um till someone calls you. It's okay to call someone and say, "Hey, I was just thinking about you," and make that effort.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so important. Sometimes being the one to reach out, and also reaching out with some curiosity about how is the person doing before you launch into what's going on with you or what you need. Give them some space, invite them into to really share how they're doing, and genuinely listen, reflect back. I mean, I was going to say it like a therapist, I hear you saying, but there is nothing that I got to tell you, there's nothing more meaningful in relationship than a person feeling heard and seen. So
Yes.
if you're calling somebody, convey to them that they are heard and they are seen. And if 2 seconds into what they're saying, you're like, girl, let me tell you about, I mean, you didn't call for them, right? You didn't call for them. So just giving them some space. And yeah, ideally they should be giving you that space to share and to just have that genuine dialogue. Nothing has to get solved or resolved, but it's just, hey, I see you and I hear you.
And not only that, one of the things I've learned is someone once said to me who was grieving, and now I use this in everything. She said, everyone always calls and said, how are you doing? She said, that is such an ambiguous question. She says, the correct question is, how are you doing today? Because each day is different for me.
Mhm.
And so now I make it a point when I call people or even when I text them, hey, how's it going today? Or what does this morning look like for you?
Yeah, love that.
Because we do change from day to day, and different circumstances, different situations can change our day or even different periods of our day. So um I know I'm so excited, so I have to make myself be quiet and listen, but I do ask those questions and stop and listen because I am curious. I want to know, how are you doing?
Mhm.
What's going on in your life? Why? In fact, my family called me the question person. So, so what other actions can you think of that we can take to correct or help this loneliness bug?
I know one thing, and we talked a little bit about this before, and you had your own example of it, but I know for me too, I am definitely visual over audio. So I feel more connected to a conversation when I can visually see the person. And sometimes, neither one of us is FaceTime ready or, Zoom ready, or there is such a thing as Zoom fatigue. But if it's a social conversation, and we're up to it, I prefer to be able to see the person. There's something about to me, it just feels like a more real connection and dialogue,
Mhm.
even if it's short, even if it's 5-10 minutes, than if it's just by phone, right? So
Mhm.
that's one thing that I think can make a difference. Yeah.
Girl, I've been in places I didn't want to go with people with FaceTime and Google. And sometimes it's like people taking that phone in some places that they don't need to take it. But
That's true. Let's respect, etiquette. If you wouldn't take me there if we were in person, don't take me there if we're on FaceTime,
girl.
right?
but but yes, my daughter only talks to me on Zoom. I mean on FaceTime. There's certain my mom only talks to me on Google or Alexa, the girl. I don't want to say her name because she'll
Oh
come
yeah,
home.
she'll yeah, she'll
That's
answer you back.
why I had to take a pause and look.
Mhm.
But and I've gotten spoiled. I really, but we're gonna talk more about that later. So speaking of that, Miss Therapist, we want to talk about the psychology of tolerance.
Mhm.
We're all in our, we're all different in our own way, and we all have unique physical features that allow us to be unique. And we all have our own likes and dislikes and our own opinions, about different topics, like we talked about this political thing and everything. But what happens when someone goes against society per se, or how we feel a person should react or think?
Well, I mean, I think we're all wired to think we're right, and we'll defend our sort of point of view or perspective to the bitter end sometimes. So just, and that definitely can lead to intolerance, also a lack of information or accurate information, or just being in more homogenous spaces where it's sort of an echo chamber and everybody is sort of saying the same thing, and anybody coming in with a differing perspective or point of view, you might view that almost like as almost an attack, and you need to defend your perspective or your group's perspective. So I think that contributes to a lot of the intolerance we see in general, right? Whatever
Mhm.
it is we're talking about, because again, intolerance has existed well before this pandemic, but ultimately, opening yourself up to learning more, to really doing sort of your own deep dive, reflecting back on why am I so committed to a particular belief or idea? Am I open to hearing different perspectives can be helpful. And then, being able to acknowledge that there may be a part of this that is more reactive, that I'm reacting to something as opposed to basing it on real information, right? And if that's what's happening, then it's becoming more personalized. There's something about this that I feel personally attached to, and what is that, and why is that? So, and then there's some things that are just intolerance in and of itself is something that we have to really kind of keep working and pushing against, being able to appreciate people and people's differences. I think it makes for a much healthier society as a whole.
So my question would be, do you feel that social media has contributed to it? And I'm saying that because I have found, for my peace of mind and not getting sucked in to any views, any intolerance, and not losing my tolerance of differences, I've had to several times had to pull myself from social media, shut down the news and whatever, to maintain my dignity and my um what do you call it? Grasp of reality, of
Mhm,
real reality versus um the world's reality.
mhm.
And so what are your thoughts on that, on how that has played into it?
Yeah, I think that, and it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, social media can be a great way to connect. We were talking about ways that you can connect, and can be a great way to connect and get into maybe different interests and things like that. On the other hand, it can also be that echo chamber, because all the algorithms are designed so that if you even look at one particular video long enough, it'll just
Girl.
keep feeding you the same types of videos over and over again. And oftentimes I will go in and I just like to see, I guess that's the therapist in me, but I like to see the comments and just see how people are talking about a particular issue. And it's both sometimes kind of disheartening, the level of anger and sometimes downright just hatred that gets expressed in these comments. And then sometimes it's sort of a bright spot to see people who are able to celebrate either differences or are able to be affirming or encouraging. So it's kind of a mixed bag. But what I do think can happen is anything to an extreme can become really detrimental and unhealthy. And knowing when, and I think this is also a way to kind of maintain your own tolerance and your own sort of social graces, knowing when to shut that down, step back, edit out some content that is not helpful to you, and knowing when you sort of are, it really is becoming draining, and you're not able to use it for anything positive or healthy or helpful. And a lot of that is about insight. It's really having some insight into yourself, and not being afraid to say, this is not having the best impact on me, or I'm not going to jump into these comments and respond. And, even though I
Ooh,
didn't like what that person
yes.
said, I'm not going to do it,
Yes.
because the energy it's not worth my time and my energy. I need, I'd rather use that in a real conversation than, being, outputting it in this social media space and just fighting to fight. Right.
And the key word that you talked about is limiting it, that sometimes we dive in and we dive in full, and it's too much. And so it's like anything in our lives, that we're to, you know, ration off, or we're not to go too much to the left and too much to the right, but have a balance in there. And I think that's where we have to determine what is our energy level, what is our energy battery per se, and how much can our mental, what is our mental capacity? Because we can only take so much of the same thing, hitting that brain over and over and over again, so,
Mhm.
and that goes down to, I would almost say, neuroplasticity, if the
Mhm.
same thing keeps hitting you over and over again. So I would definitely say that. But it's funny how, as children, we learn to share, and we didn't even care if we looked different, had different colors. Some young kids don't even realize that. I mean, they know there's a difference, but this is my brother. This is
Mhm.
there isn't that difference there. And then when we hit our teenage years, we start to become intolerant of our difference. That's where it starts really, you get those clicks, and you want to be with the cool girls, or the bad boys or whatever, and you start using your differences as, a way of dividing. That becomes your dividing line now, your difference. So one of the things, and then it goes into our adult life, so I think, I'm thinking about that, and I'm talking about it. What makes us start moving in that direction? How do we come from a child who's so open and accepting, and then just start to narrow down?
Yeah, I think a lot of those messages start, well, there's two different processes happening. I think we're talking about what are the things that we're socialized to believe and sort of understand about everything from, gender norms and, what we understand about race and ethnicity and culture,
Mhm.
right? And those are the things that we're kind of, being taught. But then there is a normative, healthy separation that does happen as a young person. A child um, at a certain point only believes they exist because of their parents exist, and then they start to get into the, oh wait, I'm an individual from my parent, but I'm still very much attached to them and defined by them. And then you get to a point where it's, oh, I'm starting to become my own individual and explore myself, and want to and need to attach more to a social group. So I think that's where you do see some of that click like behavior. But a lot of times it's also being dictated by, what's already been taught and what they've already been told at home, as well as what they're seeing for themselves within society. So, if you are, part of the the attractive girls or the whatever, then these are the things that you get, and these are the things, this is the way that you'll be treated. And so it's sort of like that intersection of what we learn as we are growing
Mhm.
and developing in our families of
Mhm.
origin, in our communities, and with, social media. And then there's also this very normal sort of natural moving through our own developmental stages, and into becoming our own person. But some of that means sometimes taking on unhealthy or unhelpful ideas about ourselves and the world, and
Correct.
then having to figure out our way through those, right?
Mhm.
Because just
Mhm.
because that's what you were taught doesn't mean that's what you have to continue to believe and continue to pass on to, the next person or the next, generation. At a certain point, you can be responsible for your own views of the world and learning to sort of reshape those. So if you've been taught intolerance, you don't have to continue with that worldview.
Oh,
You
girl,
know,
can you say that again, please? Woo, say it again. Preach.
yeah. Right. You can actually, work to separate yourself from those sorts of worldviews, but it takes work. Anything that we are looking to change about ourselves is going to take work. And one of the first things is having to be honest with yourself and saying, this is actually not a healthy or helpful worldview. And
Ex-
I have to be, it's scary to let it go and to embrace something different, but you know what? It's possible to do that.
And that's what I am always teaching and preaching. I realize that a lot of my work has to do with the willingness of my clients to accept the truths about themselves. and stop living in the lies.
Mhm.
And most of us aren't willing to deal with a lot of the truths in our lives.
Mhm.
And some of it can be because of the patterns that we've, like you said, that we've learned along the way, almost to the fact that they've become your truth, but are they the truth?
Mhm.
And so it's separating yourself from learned truths to the reality of the real truth. And so learning that. So I do a lot of work with that. So I totally get it. That is so
Mhm.
important because we just don't want to honestly deal with ourselves and
Mhm.
ask ourselves those hard hitting questions. But with that said, we're talking about tolerance and social interaction. So I have two more things I want to just hit before we get off here. So I hope if this is a little, I'm sorry if this is a little long for you today, but this has been a phenomenal conversation. So let us get these last two things, and I just want to know what your thoughts are on this social interaction we're talking about, this intolerance. And can we improve our resilience? Can we improve our happiness? We had talked before we got on about um we were discussing that you were telling me you weren't necessarily sure that it can help us happiness, give us happiness or resilience. And so we started talking about the degree of social interaction. And so it's not that all of us, we need a lot of social interaction, but for me, I do believe that there is a degree, some type of social interaction. No one, I really don't believe that being a hermit, I don't even know if that's a real word, but you understand what type of person I'm
Mhm.
talking about. A person
Mhm.
that's totally divorced themselves from society, that can be healthy, that can be healthy mentally or physically. And is there a happiness there? I would beg to disagree that if happiness would be a word, or joy would be a word that they could pull for themselves. So I think we all need some degree of social interaction. Your thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think so. When we're talking about in the context of, does socializing improve happiness and resilience? I mean, I guess I bring it back to, it for me, it really depends on the person and what is at the root of either, what's maybe making them unhappy, or what it is that they're trying to sort of when I think resilience, I think about trying to kind of come back from, right? what is
Mm-hmm.
what is it?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, do I think social interaction is healthy and important? Well, quality social interactions, healthy ones, yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, but just to caveat that, right? I don't think it's, oh well, some interaction is better than none,
Oh, no,
right?
no, 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 no,
Because
no.
sometimes it can be way more detrimental than helpful.
Oh,
Do I think that will automatically lead to, and I know that you didn't, that's not what you're saying, but that it's always a direct correlation of, well, if I just interact more, I will be happy, or I will, be able to resolve whatever's going on for me. Maybe, depending on what's at the root of it, but maybe not. It could be a significant part of working towards healing, yes. Um, but it may not be the only thing you
oh no.
need in order to be happy. Because if you're really dealing with some deep seated or deeper emotional needs, the reality is you may bring those to social interactions, which would, sort of take away from the quality of them. So I would say that I definitely would not discount it. But again, going back to understanding what is really going on with you, and that can be helpful. It may just not be the only thing that you need. And we all have different levels of social need, and that's really okay. That's
Mm-hmm.
really, really okay. It's okay for you to have a different level of social need than the next person.
But wouldn't you say, and this is something that I come across a whole lot, is a lot of reasons that people do not great things. I don't want to say, and this is Suicide Prevention Month, or I'm not sure when this airs, it will be, but but sometimes we take not good steps because we feel we're alone and no one cares about me. And that good, healthy social interaction can help in that instance and gives you that ability to come back from, because there is a reason and you're not the only one. And you're able to see that somebody else came back from. And that way you see, and that's a part of tolerance too. When someone's able to help you or travel with you through your thing and show you that you're not alone, then that's a form of tolerance. That's a form of a social tolerance. So that's what I'm talking about is sometimes we just need to know that we're not by ourselves in this, that we're not alone in this, and that there are other people like us. And I think that kind of beats that intolerance things, because you start showing where you're alike instead of where you're different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're talking about, again, empathy, um and to your point, it's being able to really take in just what you're talking about, because you're going to be surrounded by very loving, caring people, and if you're not able to feel it because of whatever is going on for you, if a person is really not able to feel it, then it isn't so much about lacking the opportunity for connection. It's about something maybe getting in the way, and making it very difficult for them to connect, right, and to really take in all the love and the care that may very well already be present in their life. So I want to just be careful with that, because I think sometimes, for somebody who, we're kind of veering into a whole other area right now, but for somebody who's really dealing with mental health issues or challenges, and the people in their lives who can, be very caring and be very present for them, if there are other things that they need to work through, it's not an absence of availability of connection or support. It may be that because of what's going on for them, they're not at a place where they can take it in. And that's where I think some of that additional work can really help to get through that, so that you can connect, you can have meaningful connections, and it can support resilience, and it can support happiness, and it can support healing.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that you said support. It
Mhm.
can support. And
Mhm.
that's why I have you here as my resident therapist, because I don't want to say anything that can't be said. I am not a therapist. I am not a medical professional. So I really honor your knowledge here. And that's why I asked you the question, because, sometimes it's part of our subject, yes, but it's also reality of what's out there and life that we face every day. And you never know who's listening to your podcast. But with all that said, we've gotten kind of heavy. So we're getting ready. I say that I do not do a podcast unless I give you some tips or tricks to get to the other side. So we're getting ready to go on the other side. We're getting ready to see that light at the end of the tunnel. We're getting ready to become tolerant and not intolerant. So we're going to talk about 5 or 6 ways to connect in our virtual world, because a lot of us are still in our virtual world. I know a lot of people that are in the job market, and not job market, but they're out in the workforce. That's the word I wanted, in the workforce, and they have gone 100% telework.
Mhm.
So then how do we connect in this virtual world? How do we still stay connected, especially going into this winter and things, God forbid, gets worse, but we may be back more home than we want to be. So how do we connect through all this? My favorite is visual at home. We talked about it earlier, is the fact that my daughter, my mother, all of us now communicate on some type of video platform, whether it's Google, the A lady from Amazon, or or from what I say, FaceTime, whatever.
Mhm.
And by the way, with Apple's new IO 15, everybody will be able to FaceTime,
Ah.
Androids as well as iOS.
Mhm.
So just a little plug in there for Apple. Y'all can pay me later. But the thing is, we need to have that. And one of the reasons is my mother, she won't even let me, but half of my face not being seen. I can't see your eyes. I can't see your face. She needs to see me. And I understand that because because she's by herself, she feels connected when she can see me. So I take her with me when I'm in the kitchen cooking or whatever. That's when we have our conversations when I'm doing
Mhm.
things so
Mhm.
that we have things to talk about. It would be almost as if she was standing in my kitchen with me and we were talking. So those are ways that we can visually do things together on the phone, watch a show together and
Yeah.
talk about it, and visually talk about it. But yes, we can keep that connection visually on the phone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I would say another thing is another component of that is focusing on quality. Like we were saying before, focus on quality of both the conversation,
Mhm.
but even the relationships themselves. Like, when you get on the phone with somebody or you're doing, an interaction with somebody, really trying to tune in and be present, and
Mhm.
keep it short. For me, I like shorter bursts of
Oh
conversations.
yes.
I'm at my best when we got a 10 to 15 minutes and I can see you and you can see me, and it's a real, I'm really tuned in, and I'm not doing other things. So focusing on the quality of interactions, and not so much about the quantity. How many people did I talk to this week? It's almost
Mhm.
irrelevant if none of the conversations are really fulfilling, right?
Well, I say one of the things I noticed that people have a hard time doing is if the conversation starts dying or petering, it's okay to say, girl, I ain't got no more to say. I'll talk to you tomorrow, or I'll talk to you later this week, or whatever. It's okay to get off the phone.
Hmm.
Don't
Hmm.
need to stay. My mother is funny because she has this thing. I'll say, okay, mom, I got to go now. She says, is this a comma or a period? Are we taking this up later, or is this the end of the conversation? Oh,
Hmm.
mom, this is a period. I'm done.
Hmm.
you know,
I love
but
that. Yeah. Hmm.
yeah, but the thing about it is, not only that is another way, if we take it to another area, I say number two is visual at work. We are on these Zoom calls and everything at work. And I love it because we're able to see the body language. We're
Hmm.
able to see if that person was in the office with you, you could read their face. You could tell by them clicking their finger on their desk, they were bored or whatever.
Hmm. Hmm.
And we're losing that if you're just on the phone. But if you are on, and I've known places that actually require that you stay on camera, you cannot take yourself off camera. And so it's just important to see that body language, to feel like you're connecting with another human being. And what happens behind the scene, and I know it because I've done it, is when you have your camera going on, you are usually talking on another phone call, or you're typing something, or you're writing something you forgot to write. And so they don't have your 100% attention, which you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
give them the courtesy of having your attention
Hmm.
just for those 10 or 15 minutes.
Right. And to, just to sort of talk about how to improve the quality of that. So I think people are struggling a little bit with Zoom fatigue and feeling very sort of burnt out from screen time. So there's a couple things that you can do there too. Try to give yourself 10 to 15 minutes in between meetings when you can, standing up, and just sort of, instead of sitting for an entire
Mhm.
day, stand up during meetings whenever possible. Also staying hydrated. Believe it or not, I always keep, my water bottle or something to keep myself hydrated. That seems to help me a little bit with my focus. And then having things that are okay to fidget with. So I like to doodle sometimes, but then I'll also have either, things that I can sort of squeeze or squish, or just kind of, keep, that helps to keep me grounded, if
Yes.
I am starting to feel fatigued. So because I think that is also, one of the things people will sometimes avoid is getting on camera, because it's like, oh, it's so draining. But, there are things that you can do to kind of manage it. And same with meetings. Like, if just because we schedule a meeting for an hour, if we cover what we need to cover, a good agenda goes a long way. If we cover what we need to cover in 30 minutes, let's wrap it up. Let's have some sound time. Let's get off the line. We don't need to drag this out for an hour, and we don't need to have a meeting to talk about the meeting for the meeting. Sometimes we need a really good agenda. We need to be able to stay focused. We need to be able to end early whenever that's possible.
Wow, that's great. And so, we're talking about now the visual, but there is still an ability to take these relationships that we've built online. Like, because I've been online so much, I have built some wonderful relationships, because we have taken the time to get to know each other better and to talk to each other more face to face. And I can't say face to face, but the thing is, we can start taking these relationships offline too, whether it's because we started in a group together, and then we took it offline online, if that makes sense, offline online. But we took it off group line to be online together, just the two of us, and really cultivate the relationship that we have and the things that we had in common, which has been wonderful. And eventually one day, either you come down here or I'll go up there, or we meet in between, and the two shall meet.
Yeah, right? That would be fantastic. Yeah, that's so true. I mean, yeah, isolate the conversation. If there's somebody in a group setting that you're kind of connecting with or clicking with, send them a direct message, and hey, can we chat offline? And just work on building a more personal interaction. And so that it doesn't feel like, yeah, we're in this group space, but it's really just, we're all just a bunch of strangers. Look to build a relationship. And like we were saying before, different relationships will serve different purposes. And, so being open to that. Not everybody is going to be, your super best friend, and not everybody is just going to be about work and, how our businesses can help each other. So open to creating different types of relationships that can, serve different purposes in your life, because that's really
exactly. And we all have something great to bring to the table. So let's serve up a wonderful meal. That's all I'm about, So we can, another thing is, there are some outside activities that we can do. There are activities that we can do together, but the thing is, it's just more safer to bring them outdoors. So you can get together offline with people outside, sit outside a cafe and have coffee together, tea together, wine together, whatever you want to drink, whatever your drink of choice is. Yeah. But you can physically get together and still remain within the CDC guidelines per se, And then the other thing is, walking together. I know a lot of people whose relationships has been that they've created walking groups and they're walking together, or that's a great opportunity to talk, exercise together. Those are things. There are people that are creating these outside yoga classes and things like this, but those are ways, go to Central Park and do an outside yoga thing, so whatever it is, but there are ways that we can connect that way too. So I think, did we do 5 or do we? I don't even know.
I don't know either, but
but they're good. They're
good. I think you've given definite tips and tricks. Whatever the number was, it was good.
So here we are. Now I may have to split this one up, because I know we have been talking a long time. I just looked at the time and I'm like, ooh, girl, we've been talking. So I have to decide whether I'm gonna split it or we're just gonna go full to the wall. I almost said the wrong thing, but anyway. So Raven, tell us, how can my audience reach you? How can you reach Raven?
Right. So they can visit my website at www.ravenswingsllc.com. You can also find me on Instagram and on Facebook as well at Ravens Wings LLC. And you can find me on LinkedIn also at Ravens Wings, or Raven Waterman on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Now you know that we will have Raven back again. This isn't the first time I've been with Raven, and I love our conversations together. And I it was so glad that you were able to hang out with us today on our ringside chat. You are amazing. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you haven't done so already, make sure you hit subscribe or follow whatever platform you're on so you don't miss an episode. So don't forget, if you want to stay in the know of what we're up to and grab a few goodies that I have just for you right there on masteringyourmonday.com/pathway. Anything you need is there. Let me know how I can serve you further. And that masteringyourmonday.com/pathway is the place to do it. Or in the comments below. I can't wait to hear from you. And remember, master every day like it's your Monday. Bye-bye. I want to thank you for listening to the Mastering Your Monday podcast. I hope you learned at least one tip or technique you can walk away with and implement today. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show, and let us know how much you enjoyed it and what you learned from this episode. We honor your time and your commitment to Mastering Your Monday podcast. And as always, we want to remind you, you are cherished, respected, valued, and in control. See you on the next episode.